It was supposed to be a warm Christmas dinner, but when I asked my daughter, Lily, for a glass of water, barely able to breathe from recent heart surgery, she snapped, "Why do you always expect us to be your servants, Dad?" In that moment, I realized I had given everything for them. In return, they saw me as nothing but a burden. Before we continue, kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a comment below, and let me know where you're watching from. Have you ever been betrayed by those you loved most? Let me know your story. I sat in the dim light of the living room, the faint hum of the Christmas tree lights buzzing in the background. I should have been enjoying the holiday, but all I could feel was the heavy weight of betrayal in my chest. Lily's words from dinner replayed over and over in my head. "Why do you always expect us to be your servants, Dad?" I thought about how, for years, I'd been the one holding everything together, paying for their college, weddings, every little thing they needed. And now I was nothing more than an inconvenience. The thought twisted in my gut like a knife. My phone buzzed. It was John, my wife's old friend. I hadn't heard from him in months, but I figured now wasn't the time to ignore him. I picked it up. "Hey, Ethan, how are you holding up?" John's voice was rough but warm. Sighed. Not great, honestly. Christmas dinner was a disaster. Felt like everything I've done for them means nothing. Lily said something, didn't she? I could almost hear the understanding in his voice. Yeah, she did, right in front of Matt. Told me I'm a burden, that girl. John's voice trailed off. "I know you've been giving everything. For them, Ethan, you've worked your ass off. Sometimes people forget. They forget the sacrifices you've made, the things you've done." I leaned back against the armchair, staring at the empty space where the fireplace used to be. "I've always been there for them, John. Always. And I thought they cared. I thought they'd appreciate it." "They don't," John said softly, like he'd been waiting for me to realize this. "They've gotten so used to you taking care of things that they think it's just what you do. They think it's a given." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. "I don't know what to do, John. I can't keep being the one who's expected to fix everything. I'm not some damn ATM. I'm their father. But now, they don't even want to lift a finger for me when I ask for something so simple." John paused. "You've given everything, Ethan. Maybe it's time to stop. Maybe it's time to stop giving and start thinking about what you need." His words hit me like a cold splash of water. I hadn't thought about that. I'd been so focused on their needs, on making sure they never wanted for anything, that I'd forgotten about myself. I'd forgotten what I needed. Forgotten that I, too, deserved respect. I ran a hand through my hair, shaking my head. What do I do? Do I just walk away? Do I let them figure it out on their own? John's voice softened. "No, you don't have to walk away, but you need to make them see what they've taken for granted. You've done more than enough, Ethan. You're not a servant. You're their father." I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't realized had been broken for a long time. The flood of anger that had been simmering under the surface now started to form a plan. A plan I wasn't sure I had the strength for until now. "You're right," I said, my voice steady but filled with a new kind of certainty. "I won't tolerate this anymore." John was silent for a moment. "Good. You deserve better than this." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in. "I'm going to make them understand. I'm going to stop letting them walk all over me. They've had it too easy." John's voice was a quiet affirmation. "You've earned your peace, Ethan." We both fell into silence, and for the first time since Christmas dinner, I felt a small, quiet sense of clarity. I didn't have to take this anymore. I'd sacrificed too much, and it was time for me to reclaim something: my respect, my dignity, my life. I hung up the phone and stared at the Christmas tree, its lights twinkling softly. The holidays weren't going to end the way I had expected, but I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. Not anymore. Asterisk. I couldn't stop thinking about it. "Why do you always expect us to be your servants, Dad?" Those words echoed in my head, like a broken record, and the more I replayed them, the more I realized how deep the divide had grown between us. My daughter, my flesh and blood, had spoken to me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience, a burden that was always in the way. And Matt, her husband, he hadn't said a word, not a single word of support. He just sat there, looking at his plate like nothing mattered. But it wasn't just that one moment. It had been building up for years. I could remember when Lily and Matt first moved into the house, fresh-faced and full of optimism. They were starting out, and I foolishly thought I could help. I thought that they deserved a shot at something better. I had a good job, a stable life. I could afford to help them. But when Matt lost his job, they came crawling to me, I remember. The phone call? Dad, we're in trouble, Matt had said, his voice trembling. I can't make the mortgage payments. We're going to lose the house. It was a blow to me, but I didn't hesitate, not for a second. I couldn't stand the thought of my daughter losing everything. Everything I had worked so hard to build. I didn't even blink before I wrote the check. It's thousands of dollars. They promised they would pay me back. But that was the last time they ever offered to. The memory of that night was clear in my mind. I handed Matt the check. He looked at me, his eyes wide, almost ashamed. Lily, standing behind him, had said, "Thank you, Dad. We'll never forget this." But I knew better. I knew they would. And they did. Months later, they didn't even bother to thank me. In fact, they barely acknowledged it. As the months passed, I found myself footing the bill for other things' tuition. Wedding expenses, even their car payments when Matt lost yet another job. It never stopped. And the more I gave, the more they took. The more they came to expect it. I had given them everything I had, without hesitation. And what did I get in return? A callous dismissal when I was in need. I thought back to the other times they had crossed a line. The little things. How Lily started making snide comments when I asked for help around the house, or when Matt refused to help with yard work, because it wasn't his responsibility. It was as if the years of support I had given them meant nothing at all. There was the time I broke my leg not too long ago. I needed help, but they were too busy to come by. "Sorry, Dad, we've got our own lives to handle," Lily had said. I told myself it was just an off day. She didn't mean it. But deep down I knew. She did now. Here I was, recovering from surgery, trying to catch my breath, and all I asked for was a glass of water. And she treated me like a burden. Her words cut deeper than the knife in my chest. I couldn't take it anymore. The thought of them just expecting me to keep giving and giving without so much as a thank you made my blood boil. I wasn't a charity. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't someone they could just walk all over. I stood up, walking to the window, my hand resting on the cold glass. The world outside was quiet, peaceful, but my mind was anything but. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about being petty. It was about reclaiming my life, the house, the one I had bought with my hard-earned money, the one I had given to them. I had put their names on the deed, thinking it was a gift, a way to give them stability, a way to make sure they would be taken care of even when I was gone. But now I realized that wasn't a gift anymore. It was a mistake. I was done. I walked back to the desk, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the cold fury building inside me. I picked up my phone and dialed the lawyer's number. Michael O'Connor. He had helped me with the original paperwork when I transferred the deed. He would know how to reverse it. I needed to reclaim that house. I needed to take it back, not out of spite, but because I had let them take me for granted for too long. They needed to understand the price of betrayal. "Michael," I said, when he picked up, my voice steady, "I need your help. I want to transfer the mortgage and ownership of the house into my name. I've had enough." The drive to Tanya's office felt longer than it actually was. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I navigated the busy streets. My mind wasn't on the road. It was focused on the plan I was putting into motion. Everything had gone too far, and now it was time for me to take back control. I hadn't expected it to come to this. But after everything, I knew I couldn't let it slide anymore. My own family had forgotten the value of gratitude, of love. They'd forgotten who had always been there for them. So now I had to remind them. Tanya's office was small but efficient, just like her. She had been the one who'd helped me with the property transfer years ago when I'd gifted them the house. Back then, I'd been excited thinking I was securing their future, that I was giving them a foundation. I was here trying to take back that foundation piece by piece. When I walked in, Tanya looked up from her desk and smiled, though her expression shifted slightly when she saw me. She could tell something was off. "Ethan," she said, standing up. "What's going on? You look like you've been through the ringer." I sat down, my hands folding in front of me. I felt like I was about to take a big step. "I need to talk to you about the house." Her brow furrowed as she took a seat opposite me. "What about it?" "I want to revoke the transfer of ownership." She blinked. "You want to take the house back?" I nodded, feeling the weight of my decision. "Yes. I want to transfer the mortgage and ownership back into my name." Tanya's eyes searched my face, clearly taking in the gravity of the request. She knew I'd given the house to Lily and Matt willingly. "Ethan, are you sure? This is a pretty serious move." Sure." The words were cold, calculated. I've had enough of their disrespect. They've crossed a line. Tanya sat back, folding her arms. "You know, there's a legal way to do this, but it's not easy. The deed transfer you signed was conditional. It's possible to revoke it, but you need to prove that the conditions weren't met." I leaned forward, my voice low. "What conditions?" "Care and respect, Ethan," she said, her tone firm. "If the recipients of the property, your daughter and son-in-law, fail to uphold the agreement, whether through neglect, hostility, or breach of those implicit conditions, then you can challenge the transfer." I absorbed her words carefully. My mind flashed to every moment they had ignored me, every time they had treated me like a burden. Not good enough, not worthy of respect. Tanya's gaze softened. "I have to warn you, this could get messy. There's no going back once you make the request to revoke. Could tear things apart with them." I nodded slowly, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. "I'm ready. I'm done being the one who always gives." She watched me for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "Okay. We'll proceed with gathering the necessary documentation, witnesses, proof of neglect, and all that. It'll take time, but you can do it. You have grounds." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. The plan was unfolding. Now, my thoughts turned cold and focused. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this for myself, for my dignity, for my respect. It was time for them to face the consequences of taking me for granted. "Thank you," I said, standing up. "Let's get started." Tanya stood with me. "You're sure about this?" I looked at her, my eyes unwavering. "Yes, I've given them enough chances. They're not going to learn until they realize they've lost everything." As I left her office, a sense of resolve settled over me. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing the right thing. They had underestimated me for too long. This wasn't just about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming my life. The days following my decision felt like a quiet storm gathering strength on the horizon. I had taken the first step, the most important step in now. I was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the pieces to fall into place. I spent those days in a strange state of calm. The house felt emptier, even though Lily and Matt were still here, living under my roof. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally breathing again. I didn't have to carry the weight of their expectations or their demands. I had made up my mind. The decisions were already set in motion. The storm would come, but I didn't have to rush it. Lily, of course, didn't notice the change right away. She was too caught up in her own world, too wrapped in her new job and whatever she was planning with Matt. But I noticed everything. I started watching them more closely, like a chess player watching the pieces move across the board. It wasn't obvious, not at first. I kept things normal. I played the part of the father who had everything together, the quiet man, who didn't rock the boat. But underneath, I was plotting. I was watching. I was collecting the evidence I would need to pull the trigger when the time came. I remember the first time I asked for something after my surgery. I wasn't expecting much, just something small. A glass of water, a simple request. I was sitting on the couch, trying to relax, when Lily walked by. "Lily," I said, my voice calm, "could you get me a glass of water?" She looked up from her phone, barely registering what I said. "It's right there," she replied, pointing to the kitchen, her tone dismissive. "You've got legs, Dad. Get it yourself." I could feel the blood rising in my chest, but I kept my voice even. "I'm still recovering from surgery. It's just a glass of water." She sighed, rolled her eyes, and walked into the kitchen. When she came back, she handed it to me without a word, her face blank. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough for me to see that things hadn't changed, that the disrespect was still there, and I was only getting started. I didn't need her to know what I was planning. All I needed was for her and Matt to keep behaving exactly the way they had been. Every little incident would pile up. Every piece of evidence I needed would fall into place. The next day, I tried something else. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read the paper when Matt walked in, his usual scowl on his face. He didn't even look at me as he grabbed his coffee. "You got any plans for today?" I asked, my voice casual, like everything was fine. Matt shrugged, not bothering to look up. "Same as always." "Why?" I leaned back in my chair, watching him, just asking. Maybe we could go over some of the bills later. I think you're overdue on a couple things." Gave me a quick glance, eyes narrowing, before he mumbled, "We'll take care of it, Dad." It was a subtle response, but it was enough to remind me. They weren't here because they wanted to be. They were here because they had nowhere else to go. Everything they had was from me. But now, they couldn't even show the smallest bit of appreciation. I let that moment sit there, unspoken. I didn't need to push. Not yet. Later, when the evening came, I saw Lily on the phone again, pacing back and forth in the living room. Matt was sprawled on the couch, flipping through channels. They didn't even notice when I entered the room. I watched them, detached, a stranger in my own house. They didn't care. I could see it now, clearer than ever. They didn't care about me, not really. They only cared about what I could give them. But that was about to change. I continued to play the role of the indifferent father, the one who had nothing to say, nothing to demand. I didn't argue when they ignored me, didn't react when they took me for granted. I was quiet, calm, but inside, I was seething. I was gathering the final pieces, building my case, and I was waiting for them to make their next mistake. I had given them everything, and they had taken it all for granted. I was done waiting. It was time to make them understand the price of betrayal, but not yet, not until I had enough. It's strange, isn't it? How easily they forget. How Lily and Matt could go on with their lives, day after day, without a second thought. Oblivious to the storm, quietly gathering around them. To them, I was just the father who always took care of things, the one who never complained, the one who always had their back. To them, I was a well that never ran dry. It's a source of support that was always there, ready to be tapped into. They didn't see me as a person anymore. They didn't see me at all. But I saw them. I watched them closely. Lily would come in after a day at work, unloading her stress with little more than a grunt and a sigh as she plopped herself down on the couch. She would speak to Matt like I wasn't even in the room, complaining about the little things. "This place is falling apart," she'd say, gesturing around. It needs so much work, and I can't do it all myself." I'd just sit there, quietly, pretending to read the paper, watching her eyes dart around, completely unaware of how much it bothered me. She wanted things, but she didn't want to pay the price. She expected everything to just fall into her. Lap and Matt. He was no better. If anything, he was worse. He never had an ounce of gratitude. I'd given him money when he lost his job again. I'd paid for his car when he couldn't afford it, and I knew. I knew deep down that neither of them cared. They just expected me to always be there, always help, always sacrifice for them. It was like they had forgotten the value of hard work. They'd forgotten what it was like to struggle and have someone help you. They didn't realize. But I had already started to change things. Little by little, I was pulling away. I wasn't going to cover for them anymore. When Matt came to me last week asking for a loan to fix his truck, I told him no. I just said it plainly, I can't help you with that. He stared at me for a moment, as if waiting for me to back down, but I didn't. I saw his shoulders stiffen, his jaw clench, but I didn't flinch. You're really gonna let it go to waste? He asked, trying to guilt me into changing my mind. Matt, I said, keeping my voice level, you've got to figure it out. I've helped you more than enough. I expected him to argue, but he just walked away, muttering something under his breath. He didn't expect me to stand firm. They never did. It felt good. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real shift was coming. They didn't see it yet. They didn't know that the ground was already shifting under their feet. I wasn't going to let them keep taking from me. Not anymore. The following days, I stuck to my plan. When Lily came to me asking if I could help pay a bill, I told her, no, just a simple, calm refusal. She looked at me, confused at first. Dad, you've always helped me with this stuff, I know. But I've done enough. You need to start taking care of your own responsibilities. Her face darkened, and I could see the resentment growing, but I didn't care. This was exactly what I needed. It's for them to feel the weight of their own expectations. For them to understand that nothing in this world was free, not even my love. As the week passed, I kept my distance. I kept my silence. Every day they got a little more anxious, a little more irritable, because the free ride they had been enjoying for years was starting to come to an end, and they didn't even know it yet. Then the day came when I knew it was time. I had already met with Tanya again. She'd made it clear that the legal groundwork had been laid. Everything was in place for me to take action. It was as simple as transferring the mortgage back into my name. It wasn't just about reclaiming the house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-respect. It's the power that I had allowed them to strip away over the years. I'd had enough. The night was quiet. Lily and Matt were watching some TV show in the living room, their voices muffled through the walls. It was the perfect time. I sat at the kitchen table, my phone in front of me. With a few quick taps, I transferred the mortgage documents. It wasn't a simple decision, but it was the only one that made sense anymore. It'd broken every unspoken rule of family, and now they would face the consequences. Once the documents were transferred, I hit send. And just like that, the papers were in Matt's inbox. The ownership of the house was no longer his. It wasn't Lily's either. It was mine. I didn't say a word to them. I didn't need to. Let them stew for a while. Let them wonder what had happened. It was too late for them to do anything now. The legal process had already begun. They had no idea the ground beneath them had already shifted. Tomorrow, the realization would hit them. But tonight, I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm I'd been waiting for was finally coming, and it would be their own doing. It had been a few days since I sent the mortgage transfer over to Matt. The silence in the house was deafening now. It's heavier than it had ever been. Lily and Matt were still going about their daily routine, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. They moved through the house, just as they always had. But the knowledge that their world was about to crumble weighed on me like a heavy, silent presence. I spent my time checking the legal documents Tanya had prepared. I had copies of everything: the deed transfer, the clauses regarding care and respect, and the reversionary provisions. It was all laid out in black and white. The house, their house, as they thought, wasn't really theirs at all. They'd violated the terms of the transfer in ways they couldn't even fathom. The things they had said, the way they treated MIT, was all there in the documentation. They thought they were safe. They thought they were untouchable because the house had been transferred to them. They didn't realize that they had signed an agreement with me that held conditions. They hadn't fulfilled those conditions, not by a long shot. I couldn't help but feel a bitter satisfaction as I read over the papers again. The terms had been clear. If they failed to treat me with care and respect, the house would revert. To me, I had no intention of being a martyr for their entitlement anymore. No more letting them walk all over me while I continued to give. I had done everything for them. They had given me nothing in return but neglect and disrespect. The irony wasn't lost on me. They thought I was too weak to fight back. They had no idea that I had been watching them for months, collecting the evidence I needed, playing the role of the quiet, suffering father. But now, the quiet part was over. The time had come for them to face the consequences of their actions. I glanced at the clock. It was almost time. I had set a specific day in my mind, the day when they would finally realize what had happened. I took a moment to process everything that had led up to this. The times I'd silently watched them take everything for granted. It's the way they had. Stopped even pretending to care, assuming that they were in control. When Matt had asked me for that loan just a few days ago, I had said no, and he hadn't even fought me on it. He just walked away, probably thinking I would change my mind. Was the moment I knew. That was when I understood that the emotional manipulation had been so deeply ingrained in their behavior that they couldn't even see the problem. They were blind to how far they'd crossed the line. I could hear the muffled sound of the TV. From the living room, the chatter of Matt and Lily's voices as they discussed something trivial. I didn't care what it was. The moment that was coming would be anything but trivial. They would realize all at once that their so-called safety net was nothing more than a house of cards waiting to collapse. They had no idea how close they were to losing it all. I stood up, walking over to the window, watching as Matt's car pulled into the driveway. The sun was setting, and the house seemed to hold its breath in the quiet evening air. I thought about how they'd look when they finally understood the truth. The shock, the panic, the realization that their entire world had been built on false assumptions. The house was mine again. It wasn't their home anymore. They thought they owned it, but I had the power now. I had all the cards. And the best part? They hadn't even seen it coming. I could almost picture Matt's face when the documents were served to him. He'd probably try to argue, maybe even yell, but the law was on my side. I had planned this so carefully, so methodically, that I knew the end result. Before I'd even started, the moment they were handed those papers, they would know the truth. They had failed to meet the terms of the agreement. They had violated every unspoken rule of respect and care, and now they would pay the price. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the quiet settle over me. Soon, very soon, the facade they had built for themselves would crumble. In its place, they would see the reality of their actions. I wasn't going to be the one left holding the bag anymore. I wasn't going to be the one who had to suffer in silence. The house was mine again, and they were about to find out the hard way. I could feel the shift in the air as soon as they noticed something was off. It wasn't immediate, not right after the mortgage papers had been sent. But slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. Lily and Matt started to pick up on the small changes, the things they couldn't quite explain away, things that were slipping through their fingers, just like their control over the house. It was the mortgage payments first. I'd been waiting for this moment. They would notice soon. Enough. The first sign was when Lily came to me, a puzzled look on her face, holding a letter in her hands. I could see the address on the envelope bank notice. I knew exactly what it was. "Dad," she said, trying to keep her voice even, but I could hear the edge of concern creeping in. "Did you get this letter?" I raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "What letter?" She handed it to me. "It's from the bank. It says the mortgage payment amount has changed. We owe more this month." Took the letter from her, reading the fine print with an exaggerated slowness. I let out a sigh. That's odd. Maybe they made an error. "You should call them." Lily didn't look convinced. She was smart enough to know it wasn't a simple mistake, but she didn't press the issue further, at least not yet. She glanced at Matt, who was sitting across the room, eyes glued to his phone. "Matt, you should look at this," she said, tossing it onto the coffee table in front of him. He barely looked up from his phone. "It's probably just some fee we missed. Call them Lily." She didn't respond immediately, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out why the payment had changed, but she didn't know what was coming. They didn't know yet that their comfort was about to be ripped out from under them. The next few days passed, and I watched them with quiet satisfaction. They were like rats caught in a trap they didn't know was set. I could hear their conversations. From across the room, the low murmur of their frustration growing as they tried to piece together the mystery of the mortgage changes. One evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I didn't let them know I was listening, but their words reached me clearly. "I don't get it," Matt said, his voice thick with irritation. We've been making the payments on time. Why the hell is it suddenly higher? Lily's voice was tight with anxiety. I don't know. I called the bank. They couldn't give me any details. They said we need to speak with the mortgage holder, but they won't tell me who that is. I'll bet it's some screw-up, Matt muttered, clearly not wanting to face the reality. Maybe we're behind on something. I stayed quiet, leaning back in my chair. It was like listening to them dig their own grave. They had no idea. They didn't know that I was the one pulling the strings now. The payments they thought they were making on their own house, their house were now an illusion. I kept my calm, my resolve strengthening with every word they said. The power I had over them, the control I'd taken back, felt like a quiet victory building. They still didn't know. They still didn't see how it was all slipping away. A few days later, I overheard more of their conversation, this time in the hallway. Matt, Lily said, frustration thick in her tone. Something is wrong. We should have enough to cover the mortgage. Why is it showing up as overdue? Matt was quiet for a beat, and then, in a lower voice, he said, I don't know. Maybe your dad did something with the account. Lily gasped, a sudden tension rising in her voice. What do you mean? You think about? Matt interrupted. We've been paying, and everything was fine, but now we're behind. What if he's changed something? What if he's pulling strings we don't know about? I felt my pulse quicken. So they were starting to put the pieces together. They were beginning to realize that their grip on everything was slipping away. Lily was silent for a long time, and when she spoke again, her voice was sharp. I'm calling the bank again. If he's involved in this, I swear. I could hear the anger in her voice, but I didn't flinch. Let her be angry. Let them try to fight against what they couldn't control anymore. They had no idea how deep the hole was, how far I had gone to reclaim what was rightfully mine. It felt like a game to me now, one I was winning. They were panicking, scrambling for answers that they wouldn't get. The house they thought they had secured was no longer theirs. The mortgage they thought was paid off had been flipped back to me. And soon they'd realize that no amount of shouting or calling would change what had already been set in motion. I remained calm. The tension between us grew, but I kept my distance. I didn't need to say anything. The truth would hit them. Soon enough, and when it did, it would hit hard, and I was ready for it. The day had come. The moment when they would finally see the truth. The air in the house felt thick, heavy with the tension that had been building for weeks. Even though they still didn't know what was coming. They thought everything was fine. Yes. They thought they were in control. They weren't. I stood in the living room, the morning light filtering through the curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. Lily and Matt were sitting on the couch, casually scrolling through their phones, completely unaware that the ground was about to shift beneath them. I took a deep breath, calm, deliberate, and moved to the center of the room. The silence I'd been holding on to now felt almost unbearable, but I didn't let it show. It was time to end the waiting. It's time to confront them. Lily, Matt, I said, my voice steady. We need to talk. They both looked up at me, their expressions indifferent at first, as if this was just another one of my usual requests. They hadn't even considered what was coming. Lily raised an eyebrow, clearly unbothered. What about Dad? I didn't waste any time. I placed the stack of legal documents on the coffee table, letting the sound of the papers landing between us break the silence. Their eyes followed the movement, but it didn't register immediately. This is what we need to talk about, I said slowly and deliberately. The house. Your house. It's no longer yours. Lily blinked, her brow furrowing as she glanced at Matt, who had stopped scrolling through his phone, his expression hardening. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice a mix of confusion and disbelief. I pushed the documents closer to them. The mortgage, the house, it's in my name again. I watched their faces change, the first signs of realization creeping in, slowly at first, then growing. You can't do that, Matt said, his voice rising. We've been paying the mortgage. We've been living here for years. You can't take it back. I stood my ground, watching them both not flinching. We broke the agreement. You didn't uphold your end of the deal. I paused, letting the words sink in. You've been treating me like a burden, It's dismissing me, refusing to help when I asked for something as simple as a glass of water. You violated the conditions of the transfer. Lily's face twisted in anger now, the shock fading into something else. So this is about that. You're taking the house because of a few arguments? You're doing this to punish us? Shook my head, maintaining my composure. This isn't about petty arguments, Lily. It's about respect. It's about the fact that, after everything I've done for you, everything I've given you, you've stopped treating me like a father and started treating me like an ATM, like some tool you can use until it runs out. Matt stood up suddenly, his voice rising with frustration. You're crazy if you think we'll just leave. You've given us this place. You can't just take it back. I let the words hang in the air for a moment, watching them both squirm as the realization finally began to hit them. They could yell, they could try to argue, but the truth was already set. You've treated me with disrespect, both of you. I continued, my voice quieter now, but still firm. You've taken everything I've given you for granted. But the conditions for the house transfer were clear. I gave you a gift, a place to live, but it was under the expectation that you would treat me with care and respect. But you haven't. Lily and Matt stood in front of me now, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and anger, their minds scrambling to process what I was saying. Matt clenched his fists, his jaw tight with rage. This is ridiculous, Dad. You've been treating us like we don't care, like we don't give a damn about you. We do. We're just trying to live our own lives. I felt the bitterness rise in my chest, but I kept my voice even. You don't care. You never did. You've never once offered me the respect I deserve. And now, you're going to find out just how much you've taken me for granted. I reached for the papers on the coffee table and slid the deed transfer back towards them. This is the legal document. The house reverts to me now. I gave you a chance, but you ignored it. So, now it's mine again. Lily looked at the papers, her hand shaking slightly as she picked them up, her face pale with shock. You're serious? She whispered, her voice breaking as the weight of the situation hit her. I nodded. You both have 30 days to leave. I've filed everything legally. There's nothing you can do about it now. The silence that followed was suffocating. Matt didn't speak, but the anger in his eyes said everything. I could see the wheels turning, the understanding settling in that they had no recourse. No way to fix this. You can't just do this, Lily repeated, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore, just the hopelessness of realizing she had lost control. I watched them both for a long moment. I've done enough for you. Now it's time for you to learn what it means to take responsibility for your own life. The room was thick with tension. Matt and Lily stood across from me, their expressions unreadable, but I could see the panic beginning to seep through their carefully crafted facets. The realization had finally hit them, like a punch to the gut. Everything they thought they had, everything they had relied on, was gone. The house, their sense of security, was no longer theirs. Lily's voice was shaky, though she tried to mask it with forced composure. Dad, please, this isn't fair. We've made mistakes, but you can't just throw us out like this. We're your family. Matt crossed his arms, his jaw clenched tight. You're not thinking straight. This house is our home. We've been living here for years, and you're going to take that away from us over some arguments? I stood still, my gaze steady, unwavering. You've lost the right to call it your home the moment you stopped respecting me. You've taken everything I've done for you for granted, and now there are consequences. Lily's eyes welled with tears, her voice rising in desperation. I'm sorry, Dad. I never meant for things to get this bad. We never meant to hurt you. Please, you've always been there for us, and we're asking for your forgiveness. Matt stepped forward, his voice more urgent. We'll change. We'll do better, I swear. We just need this. We can fix everything. Just let us stay, and we'll show you we can be better. I could feel their desperation, the urgency in their voices, but it only made me more resolute. I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I wasn't going to be manipulated by their empty promises, their hollow apologies. I took a deep breath, the weight of their pleas pressing on me, but I stood tall, unmoved. You've had your chances. I've given you everything I could, and what have I gotten in return? Disrespect, indifference. I'm done being the one who fixes everything for you. I'm done pretending like this is still a family." Lily looked like she was about to crumble, her hands shaking as she reached out, but I didn't let her get any closer. "Please, Dad," she whispered. "Please, don't do this. I'm sorry for everything. I'll do anything to make it right." Tu softened. His voice lost its edge as he took a step back and then spoke quietly. "We didn't realize how much we were hurting you. Thought you'd always be there, always fix everything for us. But we see now, we were wrong." I felt the weight of their words, but I didn't let myself soften. Not this time. Not after everything. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was stronger than ever. You took me for granted, and now you're paying the price. Their silence in the wake of my words was deafening. I saw the pain in their eyes, but there was something else there too. Fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of facing the reality. That they had made a mistake one they couldn't undo. Lily wiped her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe you're really doing this. After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw us out." I couldn't answer her, not with anything that would soften the blow. I had said everything I needed to say, had made my decision, and there was no going back. If they wanted to learn the lesson of respect and accountability, they would have. To face it head on, without any more handouts from me? "You've had every opportunity," I said, my voice steady, cold, "and you wasted it." Matt stepped forward, his face contorted with frustration. "You think this is easy for us? You think we're just going to accept that we've lost everything?" "We'll lose everything, Dad. We'll be out on the streets." "Why?" Stared at him, feeling a surge of anger, but it was no longer the kind of anger that could be swayed by guilt or threats. It was the kind of anger that came from years of silent suffering, from everything I had put up with in the name of family. This house was never yours to begin with. It was a gift, and gifts can be taken back. I've already made my choice, and there's no changing that. I let the silence hang between us. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look away. For the first time, I was holding the power. I was in control. They were the ones who had taken me for granted, and now they had to face the consequences. Lily's face crumpled. She stepped back, her tears falling freely now, but there was no pity in my heart. I had no more sympathy for the people who had used me until I was drained. "Please, Dad," she whispered through her sobs. "Please don't do this." But it was too late for apologies, too late for promises. The damage was done, and I couldn't undo the years of their neglect. I wasn't going to be the weak man they thought I was. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into giving them another chance they didn't deserve. "I'm sorry." I said the words quiet but final. "But it's too late. You've lost your chance." Matt stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief, and for a moment the two of them just stood there, staring at me like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. But there was nothing more to say. I turned and walked away, leaving them too. Their panic and their fear. For once I was free of the weight I'd carried for so long. The battle had been won. The day of reckoning had arrived, and the weight of it hung in the air like the calm before a thunderstorm. I didn't need to hear it from them to know the truth. They'd finally realized what I had been telling them all along. The house was no longer theirs. Their precious security, the thing they had clung to so desperately, had vanished with a few signatures and a few well-placed words. The documents had been filed. The deed was now officially mine again. I'd watched them struggle for the past. Few days, the tension in the house was palpable, though they did their best to hide it. They still had their pride, still pretended to be in control, but I could see the cracks appearing. The phone calls they made to the bank, the frantic discussions they had behind closed doors, everything about them screamed that they were grasping at straws, trying to figure out what had happened, how everything had slipped away so quickly. Lily had started avoiding me, her movements stiff and hurried, like she couldn't bear to face me. She didn't have to say anything. Her guilt was evident in every glance she threw my way. And Matt was trying to act tough, trying to maintain some semblance of authority in the face of defeat. But I saw the fear in his eyes when he looked at the bills piling up on the kitchen counter. They weren't looking at me any more like they had. Before, like I was just a source of endless help, an open checkbook. Now they were looking at me like they weren't sure whether to beg for mercy or lash out in anger. The roles had reversed, and it felt both satisfying and deeply unsettling. I'd always believed in family. I'd always wanted to be the father who would do anything for his children. I had been there for every milestone, every hardship, every moment of need. But in return, I had been treated like nothing more than a provider. When I had been weak, they had walked right over me. Now, I could see them trying to claw their way back to something they thought they were entitled to. It wasn't just the house they had lost, it was my trust. And that was something far more precious. This morning they finally came to me. It was inevitable. They had no choice but to face me now. Lily was the first to speak, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "Dad, we don't know what to do. We don't have the money to fix this. The bank's not going to let us stay here if we can't pay. What are we supposed to do now?" She looked so small standing there, her face drawn with exhaustion and guilt. She wasn't the same person who had arrogantly dismissed me just weeks ago. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of sympathy for her, but I couldn't let that change anything. Not now. Matt stood next to her, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His usual bravado was gone, replaced with frustration. "Just take everything away from us, Dad. This isn't fair. We made mistakes, but we didn't deserve this. We didn't think it would come to this." I could hear the desperation in his voice, but I didn't respond right away. I wasn't going to be manipulated again. Not after everything that had happened. I had stayed quiet for so long, but now it was time to make them understand the cost of their actions. "You didn't deserve this?" I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "No, you didn't deserve the things I gave you. But you didn't just take them. You took me for granted. My time, my money, my love. You thought I would always be here to fix things for you, to save you. When you screwed up, and look where we are now." I saw the realization hit them. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No loud outbursts or grand confrontations. It was just the quiet understanding that they had, in fact, done this to themselves. They had pushed me to the breaking point, and now they were facing the consequences. The silence between us grew heavy as I stood there, watching them struggle. Lily spoke again, her voice soft, almost broken. "Dad, I'm sorry. I really am. We didn't understand. We thought you would always be there, that nothing would ever change. We were wrong." I nodded. But I didn't say anything. What was there to say? The trust was gone. The damage had been done. They would never be able to see me the same way again, and that was the hardest part of it all. I wasn't angry with them anymore, but I wasn't going to let them back into my life the way they had been. They had crossed a line. For the first time in days, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Not relief, not joy, but peace. I wasn't pleased by their downfall, but I knew it was necessary. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, and I couldn't keep enabling them. I had to stand firm, for my own sake as much as theirs. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice low but steady. "You've had your chances. Now, you'll have to figure this out on your own. I won't be helping you this time." Lily didn't look up at me, her eyes filled with shame, but Matt's gaze was full of anger, still trying to hold on to whatever pride he had left. But he said nothing. Neither of them did. They were realizing slowly that this was the final twist, the final consequence of their actions, and I couldn't take it back. But for the first time, I felt like I had done the right thing. The house felt different. It wasn't the same as before. It was quieter now, not just because Lily and Matt had packed up most of their things, but because there was a heaviness in the air of finality that couldn't be ignored. The silence settled into the corners, like a dark reminder of everything that had changed. I had reclaimed my home, but I had also reclaimed something much more significant, my dignity. The years I had spent sacrificing, giving, bending over, backwards for them had taken a toll. It hadn't been easy to stand firm, to watch them scramble as they realized the consequences of their behavior. But now, I felt a sense of clarity, of strength. The house was mine again, but the cost had been high. I walked through the rooms, feeling the emptiness in every step. I had worked hard for this place. It was supposed to be a refuge for my family, a place to gather, to build memories. But it had become a prison one I had locked myself into by continuously giving, continuously putting them first. I stopped in the living room, the same room where they had once sat without a care in the world, where Lily had made her cutting remarks, where Matt had stared blankly at the TV as if the world outside didn't exist. I could still hear their voices, their laughter, their casual dismissal of my requests, but it all felt distant now, like a memory of someone else's life. The house was still filled with their things, clothes, books, small trinkets that once had meaning but now felt like nothing more than symbols of their entitlement. Their absence made it feel hollow, but I didn't feel the emptiness the way I thought I would. There was no loneliness, no longing. I had gotten something I had needed for years: control, my own space, my own voice. But even with the house back in my possession, there was no joy in it. The satisfaction I had expected was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a quiet resignation, the kind you feel when you know you've done the right thing, but the cost is too high to feel victorious. I thought about Lily and Matt. I thought about how they had begged, pleaded, tried to convince me to forgive them, to give them another chance. I had seen the desperation in their eyes, but it hadn't moved me the way I thought it would. I didn't feel anger, not anymore. I didn't feel the bitterness that had festered in me for so long. Instead, there was just emptiness. I didn't regret my decision. They needed to face the consequences of their actions. They had spent too long taking me for granted, assuming I would always be there to catch them when they fell. They had used me, manipulated me, and now they had to live with the fallout. They had no one to blame but themselves. I sat down on the couch, the one they had once lounged on carelessly, and looked around. The house still felt like mine, but it also felt like a different place now. The walls had seen too much. They had witnessed too many moments of silence, too many failed attempts at making things right. And in the end, I knew the family bond between us had been shattered beyond repair. I wasn't angry with them anymore. I was beyond that, but I could never go back. I could never forgive them the way I had forgiven them in the past. Trust, once broken, couldn't be mended with a few promises or tearful apologies. They had made their choice when they decided to treat me as a burden. Now they had to live with the consequences. The silence in the house deepened as the last of their things disappeared. It wasn't just the physical stuff that had been taken, it was the years of what I had tried to build with them. The trust, the love, the sense of family. All of it had been lost in their greed and neglect. I stood up, walking through the house once more. The front door was still the same. The rooms still held the same furniture, the same memories, but they were hollow now. I had reclaimed my home, but what had been taken in the process could never be given back. It was quiet, so quiet that it felt almost oppressive. There was no joy in it, no sense of peace, just a cold finality. I could hear their voices now in my mind, but they weren't the same. They were different, distant, like echoes of a family that had never truly understood the price of their betrayal. And I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what happened from here on out, things could never go back to the way they were. As I stood in the center of the house, looking out the window, I felt the weight of everything that had happened. It was over, and all I had left now was the bitter satisfaction of knowing that I had finally taken back what was mine. I stood in the center of the living room, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The house was still mine, but it didn't feel like the sanctuary it once had. There was no comfort in these walls anymore, no warmth. What had once been a symbol of family, of shared moments, now felt like a monument to everything I had lost. I thought about Lily and Mott, how quickly everything had unraveled, how they had thought I would always be there for them, always bail them out when things went wrong. But they hadn't seen the cost of their actions until it was too late. They hadn't understood how far they had pushed me, how many times I had sacrificed for them, and how much I had taken from myself to keep them happy. Now they were gone, and I had my house back. I had my dignity back. But at what cost? The house echoed with silence. The rooms that used to be filled with laughter, with voices, were now hollow. The space felt colder than I remembered, like the warmth had been drained. Out of it, I had reclaimed what was mine, but the price was steep. My family was gone, and no amount of walls or possessions would fill the emptiness that remained. I walked through the house slowly, my footsteps quiet against the floorboards. The place looked the same, familiar, but foreign. The pictures on the walls, the furniture, the little things that used to feel like home, they were all still here. But they didn't bring me comfort anymore. I wasn't sure what I had been expecting, but this wasn't it. I had been right to do what I did, hadn't I? They needed to face the consequences of their actions. I had given them everything I had, everything they'd asked for, and they had thrown it back in my face. I couldn't let that go on. I couldn't keep enabling them. But the truth was, even now, as I stood in this empty house, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I had one. I felt alone. I had gained my self-worth back. One had taken control of my life. But in doing so, I had lost the very thing I had spent so many years trying to protect, my family. As I stood by the window, staring out at the yard, I thought about the memories I had tried to hold on to. The Sunday dinners, the holiday gatherings, the moments that had made me feel like I mattered. They were gone now, shattered by my own decision. I couldn't help but wonder if I had done the right thing, or if there had been another way. But there was no turning back now. The damage had been done. My family was no longer the family I had known. It was something else entirely, something beyond repair. They had crossed a line, and so had I. But in the end, I had to accept the consequences. Of my actions, I had made my choice. And now, as I looked at the empty rooms, I knew that there was no going back. The house was mine again, but it wasn't the same. It could never be the same. The silence stretched on, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of it. The loneliness, the regret, the loss, but also the strength. If you've ever had to make tough decisions to protect your self-worth, share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Ethan did the right thing? Or did his actions go too far? Thanks for watching.